Welcome to the Copenhagen History Project. My name is Patrick, and the project is meant to show the fantastic history of the city of Copenhagen. This video is the second part of the series about the defenses of Copenhagen. This video is about the ramparts or the earthworks of the city of Copenhagen. These are the defensive ring and bastions that surround Copenhagen very much still to some extent to this day, but used to completely surround and encircle the city of Copenhagen. The defense works of Copenhagen is a history of evolution and also a history of adapting to the new nature of war that continuously evolved throughout time. As the city of Copenhagen originates in the small fishing village of Hafnia, the initial defenses were also equally humble in being a ditch and an earthwork rampart. But as the city grew, both in importance and in size, the defenses would equally also expand. And in the 1500s, an actual wall was created from not just earth, but also from clay bricks. And in this wall there would be 11 towers, one of which would be Jarmerstårn. Jarmerstårn or Jarmers Tower is the only one left, and you could say it's only a ruin that is left, but this is actually the only part we have left of the original defense of Copenhagen. But the fact that we do have Jarmers Tower is kind of interesting because Jarmers Tower, now standing in the middle of a busy intersection, sort of signifies a corner of the logic of the defense of Copenhagen that would continue, and that is having the west wall that goes down from the Copenhagen Canal and then up northwards, and then that would turn over eastwards towards the citadel. Now, originally the city would not extend all the way to the citadel, but would come around and go down again to the harbor of Copenhagen at what is now Gothersgade, which is a very busy drinking bar street, party street. But as with the later defenses that would lead all the way to the citadel, water was an integral part of the defenses, and they would lead water from the lakes of Copenhagen down to the wall and to the ditches in front of the wall in order for the ditch to be larger and also therefore being more of a barrier for attackers. This seems to also be the logic when Christian IV wanted to expand the city to St. Anne's city. St. Anne's city is a doubling of size of the original medieval city. And one of the great advantages of expanding the city in the planned St. Anne was that the defense works could almost move out to the actual lakes, and obviously the lakes of Copenhagen are far larger than the ditches that would take water from the lakes. And so Christian IV wanted to build earthenworks and ramparts, also the St. Anne citadel, the Skansen, but he also wanted to build the ramparts all the way along from the original corner of Jarmers Tower all the way along to the citadel and move them up to the lakes in order to use the lakes as an integral part of the defenses again. And when I call the defenses ramparts and not a wall, it's because these are not made of brick and stone. They are made of soil that has been shaped into 25 bastions. Because obviously when we're talking about Christian IV, this is in the 1600s. And in the 1600s they had cannons that could shoot down medieval walls quite efficiently. So instead they would build these 25 bastions of 4.5 meters of soil with a 2-meter breastwork to protect the defenders, and these would be 12 meters in depth. And then in front of it would be the moat or the ditch, and that would be 39 meters wide, and the depth of that would be 3 meters. And it's quite obvious when you look at old maps of the east wall itself and the other bastions that would soon surround Copenhagen as a network of defenses, that both the individual bastions in size and in shape would change and be improved, but also that the number of bastions would also just keep growing. And you can see that some of them that were planned just never were built. And you can see on this map specifically, you can see parts, ramparts and bastions that I know were never built. So I think that's kind of interesting. This map is from 1750, and obviously they were looking into how can we expand upon the existing bastions, but they just never came around to doing that. And that means that the defensive ring of Copenhagen with these bastions were, my best guess, done by 1692 when the Nyværk defense bastions of Nyholm were constructed. I think there could be several different reasons for the expansion stopping at around this area. The the by 1692 ramparts are also where we still see the ramparts that are left today. And I think there's several explanations for why it stopped here and was not expanded further as otherwise Christian IV had done already. And that is, first of all, finances. We know from the construction of the citadel that it was hugely expensive. But also because already, if we just go back to the storm of the Swedish in 1659, there was a couple of defense works and fortifications outside the city that essentially were not used as defenses because there was no resources and manpower to man those in the rush that was manning all the defenses. And so the east wall itself became the main defense line, even though on the other side of the lakes there was a couple of fortresses, as you see on this map. Another thing is that the Swedish decided to attack, and I think this is fairly interesting. The Swedish decided to attack on the west end of the wall, which is also the same place where it is stated that the medieval city of Copenhagen was mostly attacked from. And this is because this is naturally the weakest point to defend due to the lakes ending up short here. The St. Jørgen or St. George Lake ends sort of early, you could say, before the sea. And this is also quite close to Slotsholmen, or the island of the castle. So naturally this becomes the area that attackers will go for, and it is difficult. You could obviously expand the bastions, but it doesn't make in this area, but it doesn't make much sense to expand the bastions further in the other directions. So once they finished the bastions at Nyværk that protects the navy, then essentially you have created the fortress that you want to have by having now protected also the navy and not just the city. But because the ramparts used to enclose the city circularly and still are very present, some of them, they do make a very big difference for the geography of Copenhagen. And as an example, if you want to go from the island of Amager, which leads to Sweden and also the airport, there are two main roads that lead cars into the city, and that is because there is only one bridge that is just south of the old rampart, and then one road that goes through Christianshavn, and that is the only one that crosses in over the moat. And so obviously this is a sort of congestion, and that's because of the old defense works. And obviously that is a nature that very much was also prevalent when the ramparts and the bastions were still playing a part actively in the defense of Copenhagen, because you cannot forget that Copenhagen was a fortress city, and they would close the gates during the night as late as the 1800s during the reign of Frederick VI. And the closing of the gate was something very important and ceremonial, and the king would show up to see the closing of the gate and would take the key with him from the east gate. And the gates would then be locked until early morning, 5 o'clock in summer and 7 o'clock in winter. And that was so that peasants could show up, come in and sell their goods. Obviously, as with everything, you could bribe the guards and the authorities there, and there was also sort of almost a small industry as far as I can tell from this. And also, I guess, accepted to some extent. You could not bribe them to bring in your carts, but if you had a carriage, meaning for people, and that means for more wealthy people, then there would be a sort of almost tax to the authorities there that would let you into the city after the gate was closed. And this sort of borderline corruption taxation would continue later when the ramparts would be very fashionable to stride on and go for a walk on, because you could only walk on the inside of the bastions, and the view in there was not very good. So you could buy from the commander of Copenhagen, you could buy an official badge that would allow you to walk on the small path on the outside of the bastions. And that is bribery, I guess, but it was officially and it was known. So I guess it was sort of it was just part of the system. Now, another part of history that was also a little different was that when they decided in 1857 to tear down the ramparts and be able to expand the city because they no longer had military purpose, they were still, as I say, fashionable to walk on. And the king, Frederick VII specifically, would really like to ride along the ramparts all the way around Copenhagen. And because they were tearing down these ramparts, um, close to now Nørreport, the station, they would make a very wide opening for a road, and he still wanted to be able to ride around it. And so they constructed a bridge for him to be able to ride across from the gap, essentially. And this bridge still exists. They move it afterwards, and now it is in Ørstedparken. And it is a bridge that I think most Danes know, but I just don't think they know the origin of it. But obviously, Ørstedparken is interesting in the sense that this is still a part of the old defense works. So the lake here is the old moat, and then you have a quite high increase, I'd say around 4.5 meters, because that's what Christian IV wanted. A 4.5 meter high hill that overlooks this lake. And obviously that's because, as I say, Ørstedparken is one of the parks that are created from the old bastions and the old defense works. And it is one of the places where you can clearly see, if you know what to look for, that these are the leftover of the bastions. The most well-preserved part of the bastions to this day are the ones that lead around Christianshavn and Nyholm, separating Copenhagen city from Amager, essentially. And this is obviously also what causes the congestion issues traffically. Um, Unfortunately, this part of the bastion is overgrown by nature. That's not an issue, but it makes it a little bit difficult to see how it would have looked like. And therefore, the citadel is the I'd say the best reference on how the bastions and the defense works would have looked like. Obviously, the citadel is the last standpoint, so the ramparts here are taller than 4.5 meters, but I think it gives a good indication of how it would have looked like. Now, half of these bastions that are facing Amager are also the ones that were military area for the longest time. Nyholm and that the bastions that face Amager at the Nyholm area, they are still military area. But the bastions that are between Christianshavn and those at Nyholm are now Christiania. And the reason for that is that when the military laid down the barracks there in the 70s, free-spirited citizens occupied the area and decided to create their own community there. And the nature of Christiania is that you don't necessarily tear down and build back up. So a lot of the military buildings are still there, and obviously also the bastions. Another interesting thing is that obviously this is also beautiful. This is a lakey, hilly, wooded area now, and there are 60 different types of birds there in the area that is not even that big in the lakey area around the Christiania bastions. To me, the ramparts and bastions of Copenhagen are really interesting because they are the cause and effect of a lot of other stories, from the initial building, Christian IV, to the power plays and the defensive nature of things, without even talking and diving into the strategy of Denmark as a nation at the time, and the storm on Copenhagen and the bombardments, all three of them, of Copenhagen. This is just really very an integral part of the city in so many ways. But also to the areas that came to be after taking down these ramparts, like Christiania and the Tivoli, that are two completely different approaches to what do we do with this area afterwards. And so I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to the ramparts, the history of them, and also how they have now come to be a more contemporary part of Copenhagen. Thank you.